Welcome to Movie Tellers. Today we're recapping a horror movie called The Curse of the Necklace. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this thrilling movie recap. The film opens with a tense and eerie scene. A woman is in labor, struggling to give birth while wearing a mysterious red necklace that seems to be affecting her. Her husband, noticing her distress, attempts to remove it, but the midwife quickly stops him, urging the woman to push harder as the baby is about to arrive. Suddenly, the baby is born. But to their horror, it appears lifeless. The midwife desperately tries to revive the child, gently striking its back, while the father cries out in frustration. Just when all hope seems lost, the baby lets out a piercing scream, filling the room with a wave of relief. However, the mother's ordeal is not over. She gasps in pain, screaming that there is another baby and that it's burning her. The red necklace around her neck begins to glow ominously. 30 years later, the story shifts to the present, introducing a small family of three. Laura Davis, the mother, and her two daughters, Judith Davis, the eldest, and Ellen Davis, the youngest. Ellen, an energetic and lively child, is frantically searching for her pencil case before heading to school. Meanwhile, Judith, more focused on her appearance, struggles to style her hair, preparing to secretly meet her boyfriend Davis, who waits outside. The sisters constantly bicker, with Ellen claiming that the pencil case belongs to her, a gift from their father. Their argument escalates until Laura steps in to break it up. Ellen deeply misses her father, who's no longer living with them due to his troubled marriage with Laura. Their separation is on the verge of divorce, a reality that Ellen struggles to accept. She asks her mother when her dad will be back, but Laura avoids the conversation and sends them off to school. On their way, Judith suddenly rushes toward Davis's car, eager to meet him. Before leaving, she warns Ellen not to tell their mother about her secret relationship, even threatening, "If you say a word, I'll slit your throat." The constant sibling rivalry leaves Ellen standing alone, feeling disappointed and hurt, and so the unsettling story unfolds. The scene opens in a police station, where Detective Davies, the father of Ellen and Judith, is at his desk. His colleagues comment on the strange smell clinging to his uniform, prompting him to admit that he hasn't been sleeping at home. He's been staying at a motel all week. He assures them he'll smooth things over with his wife before carrying an evidence box to the storage room. As he organizes the items, a peculiar dust-covered box falls to the ground. Intrigued, Davies cautiously approaches and opens it. Inside, he finds evidence from a long-forgotten murder case from 1938. Among the artifacts, a beautiful yet eerie necklace catches his eye. As he lifts it, faint whispers echo in his mind, holding him spellbound. Later, Davies arrives at his family home, where his estranged wife, Laura, greets him with visible apprehension. He asks if he can stay for dinner, at least to see the girls, but Laura is unmoved. "You can't just show up, play the good guy, and leave me to explain everything," she snaps. Before she can shut the door on him, Ellen overhears her father's voice and excitedly invites him in. Laura, reluctant but outnumbered, allows it. During dinner, Davies inquires about Judith's recent biology test. She coldly responds that it was 2 weeks ago, and she scored a C. Laura, caught off guard, scolds her. "You didn't even tell me?" she asks, disappointed. Judith dismisses it as unimportant, but Laura presses further. Ellen chimes in playfully, revealing that Judith has been spending time with a boy at school named David. Davies seizes the moment, offering to meet him. Judith, visibly annoyed, retorts sarcastically, "Should I bring him to your motel?" The mood sours instantly. Attempting to lighten the tension, Davies reaches for a box of donuts, offering them as dessert. Ellen eagerly accepts, but Judith remains unimpressed. Then Ellen notices another box in his possession. Curious, she asks about it. With a hopeful smile, Davies replies, "I'm glad you asked." He retrieves the box and presents its contents. A necklace, the same one from the evidence room. He offers it to Laura, hoping to mend fences. She takes it, but eyes him warily. "You think you can buy me off too?" she mutters. Judith, disgusted, storms off. Davies, sensing rejection, decides to leave. Ellen begs him to stay, but he refuses, asking her to trust him. As he departs, Laura follows him outside. He vents his frustration. "You can't do this alone," he insists, before walking away. Back inside, Laura tosses the necklace into the trash, dismissing it as cheap costume jewelry. But as soon as she leaves the room, Ellen sneaks over, retrieves it, and slips it around her neck. Instantly, the lights flicker, and a chilling whisper fills the air. Later that night, Judith hears Ellen talking to someone. Concerned, she enters her room and finds her reading a children's book titled The Lost Duckling. Judith frowns. "That book is for little kids." Ellen, unfazed, replies, "I was reading it to the little boy." Judith stiffens. "What boy? You scared him away." Judith shakes her head. "You're too old for an imaginary friend, and too young for an imaginary boyfriend." She snatches the book and notices the necklace around Ellen's neck. Alarmed, she removes it. "You can't let Mom see you with this," she warns, before tucking Ellen into bed. Back in her room, Judith examines the necklace closely. A strange energy radiates from it, accompanied by faint whispers. Suddenly, her door creaks open on its own. She turns, heart pounding. The door slams shut. Panicked, she rushes to Ellen's room, but the door won't budge. Just as she turns to leave, the door eerily swings open. She steps inside, only to see blood pooling from beneath Ellen's bed. Judith gasps, her breath hitching. Trembling, she lifts the blanket, but there's nothing there. She turns, only to see Ellen standing before her, drenched in blood. A scream rips from Judith's throat. In an instant, Laura is shaking her awake. "Judith, what's wrong?" Judith's eyes dart to Ellen, who is seated on the bed, perfectly fine. "It was Ellen. She was covered in blood." Laura sighs, trying to calm her. "It was just a nightmare." But Judith isn't so sure. The next day, Judith and Ellen return home from school to find Davies waiting outside. As Judith steps out to join him, Ellen retreats to her room, talking to her imaginary friend. But as she holds out her stuffed dolphin, a small, unseen hand grabs it. Outside, Judith and Davies share a moment. She takes a drag from a cigarette, her first time, and he watches her with a mix of concern and admiration. The moment shifts when their eyes meet, and suddenly they kiss, lost in an unexpected wave of emotion. Inside the house, Ellen continues playing. She asks her invisible friend his name, and, using toy alphabet blocks, he spells out Jonah.
Jonah?
Suddenly, the bookshelf behind her tilts dangerously, as if pushed by an unseen force. The towering structure collapses, but just before it crushes Ellen, an invisible hand pulls her to safety. Judith rushes in. "Are you okay?" Ellen, shaken but certain, says, "The boy! He saved me!" Judith, exasperated, snaps, "He's not real, Ellen! He is real! I gave him my dolphin!" The argument is interrupted when Laura returns home. "What's going on?" she demands. Judith, trying to cover for Ellen, mutters, "She was climbing the bookshelf." "No, it fell on its own. Jonah pulled me away," Ellen protests, pointing to a fresh bruise on her arm. Laura, exhausted, shakes her head in disbelief. "Enough," she turns to Davies. "And you? Who are you referring to?" Davies straightens and introduces himself to Laura for the first time in a long time. Then, without another word, he steps away. That night, Judith sat at the dining table, lost in her school assignment, when a faint whisper echoed through the room. It was coming from her bag. Slowly, she reached in and pulled out the necklace. As she stared at it, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, the birds in their cage erupted into frantic screeches, their wings flapping wildly. Startled, Judith turned toward the sound, only to see a young boy sitting at the dining table. He locked eyes with her for just a moment, before quickly slipping away into the shadows. Fear gripped her, but curiosity pulled her forward. She cautiously followed him, stepping into the dimly lit room where he stood with his back to her, facing the wall. "Jonah?" she asked softly. Silence. Before she could take another step, the boy darted past her, whipping around, her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her now was a grotesque, pale woman with hollow eyes. Judith barely had time to scream before the woman lunged at her, knocking her to the ground. The woman's mouth stretched open unnaturally wide, and thick, dark blood poured out onto Judith's face. She struggled against the suffocating grip, kicking and thrashing until she managed to break free, scrambling to her feet and running straight to her mother's room. Laura jolted awake as Judith shook her frantically, crying out about the blood-soaked woman. Alarmed, Laura rushed downstairs with Judith, but the house was silent. No one was there. Judith, still trembling, subtly kicked the necklace out of sight before Laura could notice it. Displeased but exhausted, Laura sighed. "Enough. Both of you sleep in my room tonight." Though Laura tried to comfort them, Judith couldn't shake the terror of what she had seen. As they drifted into uneasy sleep, a shadow crept into their room. Laura's dreams pulled her into a suffocating, crimson-lit space. She found herself standing in a blood-red room, staring at a woman lying motionless on the ground. The woman gasped awake, her breath ragged and desperate. "He doesn't love," she warned, her voice breaking. "He only wants to kill." Before Laura could ask what she meant, the woman suddenly dissolved into dust. Spinning around in terror, Laura found herself face to face with the same ghostly figure. It lunged at her. The necklace materialized around her throat, tightening like a noose. Gasping for air, Laura shot awake in a cold sweat. Heart pounding, she rushed outside to the trash bin. But the necklace was gone. With no other choice, she drove straight to Davy's office, bursting in. "Where did you get that necklace?" she demanded. Davies hesitated, but eventually admitted, "It was evidence from an old murder case. I need to see it." After another long pause, he relented, leading her to the evidence room. Laura's stomach churned as she took in the dusty case files. As Davies read aloud from the reports, the scene from long ago came to life. A man, distressed, reporting a mutilated animal to the police. A child standing nearby, fixated on the corpse, his gaze hollow, almost possessed. The father, unable to bear it any longer, deciding to leave his wife and son despite the woman's desperate pleas. Left alone, the mother did the unthinkable. She chained her child in the barn, unable to control whatever darkness had taken hold of him. But soon after, a neighbor discovered them, both mother and son lifeless. It was presumed that she had suffocated the child before slitting her own throat. Davies furrowed his brow. If this case was closed, all of this evidence should have been destroyed. Why is it still here? Laura's breath hitched as she picked up a photo of the woman. Recognition sent a chill down her spine. "I've seen her before," she whispered. "In my dream." Back at home, Laura confronted Judith. "Do you remember that necklace your dad gave me?" Judith hesitated before nodding. "Where is it?" Judith led her to where she had hidden it under a chair. But when she reached for it, the necklace was gone. A sinking feeling settled in Laura's chest. "Where's Ellen?" Outside, Ellen giggled as she swung back and forth on the garden swing. Alone, or so it seemed. "Jonah," she whispered, glancing beside her. The empty swing next to her creaked softly. Then suddenly the swing jolted. An invisible force pushed her higher. "Jonah, stop!" she cried, gripping the chains tightly. The swing went higher. Faster. Her small hands slipped. She screamed as she was flung into the air. Laura and Judith ran outside just as Ellen crashed to the ground, her arm twisting at an unnatural angle. Tears streamed down Ellen's face as she clutched her broken arm. Without hesitation, Laura scooped her up and rushed her to the car. "Judith, take that necklace off her," she ordered, speeding toward the hospital. As Laura drove away, Judith stood frozen in the empty house, the weight of silence pressing in on her. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for the necklace, still drawn to it despite everything. The whispers returned, wrapping around her like a phantom embrace. A cold grip tightened around her wrist. She gasped as an unseen force shoved her back into the chair, holding her down. Before she could scream, Jonah emerged from the shadows, his eyes hollow, his expression eerily blank. Without warning, he dissolved into a black mist, disappearing into her mouth. David arrives to find Judith in a disturbed state, brutally killing birds. When he questions her, she suddenly attacks him, forcing him to flee. As Judith realizes the horror of her actions, she panics and screams in distress. Meanwhile, Laura notices Judith's necklace and asks her to remove it. Laura also realizes the birds are missing and questions Judith, who nervously claims they simply flew away. Suspicious and confused, Laura contacts a retired detective who investigated a murder case 36 years ago, mentioning that the case is connected to a necklace. Upon hearing this, the detective is visibly shaken and immediately seeks out his former partner, Beatrice, who was deeply connected to the case. As they drive to Laura's house, it's revealed that Beatrice is the sister of a midwife, introduced earlier in the story. Upon arrival, she gathers everyone, Ellen, Judith, and Laura, and reveals the dark history behind the necklace. She recounts how a desperate woman, unable to conceive, resorted to supernatural means. Despite knowing the artifact's sinister past, her sister Martha had attempted to purify the necklace's power, but the moment Ruth, the woman, put it on, it marked her fate. Beatrice explains that the necklace has the power to trap and torment souls, and in order to uncover the full truth, she must connect with the necklace to relive the past. As Beatrice channels the visions, she sees Ruth strangling a child, her own son, before an unknown figure slits her throat. Overcome with grief, Beatrice breaks down, revealing that the child, Jonah, was not inherently evil, but was poisoned by the necklace's curse from birth. She warns that Jonah's vengeful spirit has returned and is now targeting everything Laura has encountered. Though initially reluctant, Beatrice is urged to help cleanse the family's curse, seeing it as a chance to redeem her sister's mistake. She proposes conducting a seance to sever Jonah's connection to the living world and banish him back into the necklace. However, Judith refuses and storms out. During the seance, Beatrice lights a candle, warning everyone not to let fear consume them. She slits her hand, dripping blood onto the necklace, while Laura and Ellen place their hands on it. As the ritual begins, Ellen is transported to a vision, a red-hued room where she finds Jonah cowering under a table. Meanwhile, Judith screams in agony upstairs, levitating violently. The spirit of Ruth emerges, shaking the room with immense force. As Beatrice exerts herself to banish the spirits, blood seeps from her eyes. With one final surge, the spirits let out a tortured scream before vanishing. For a moment, it seems the ritual has succeeded, but when Beatrice opens her eyes, the candle is still burning. Something is wrong. A loud bang echoes from the roof. The detective rushes to investigate and finds Judith eerily staring at him before she suddenly pushes him down the stairs to his death. Realizing what she has done, Judith collapses in shock screaming in terror. As police arrive to remove the detective's body, Beatrice insists that something is still missing. Laura recalls a knife from the original murder scene, which Beatrice believes holds crucial answers. Though skeptical, David reluctantly retrieves the knife for them. Beatrice and Ellen use the knife to access another vision. This time, they witness Ruth preparing dinner before heading to a barn where a chained boy, William, is held. She slides food to him, but he lunges at her aggressively. As Ruth returns to the house, she scolds Jonah for leaving his toy outside, unaware that William has used it to escape. Moments later, she discovers Jonah's lifeless body, brutally stabbed. Devastated, she buries him. But upon re-entering the house, she finds William approaching her with a knife. A struggle ensues, and Ruth strangles William to death, only for the necklace's dark power to awaken, causing an unseen force to slit her throat. Beatrice, horrified by the revelation, drops the knife. She realizes they had banished the wrong boy. Jonah was innocent. William was the true evil, corrupted by the necklace, and he is still present. At that moment, Judith enters, convulsing violently before collapsing. When she rises, William's spirit has taken over. Grabbing a knife, she threatens her family, but David manages to subdue her before she passes out. Beatrice insists they take her to the farm, the place of her birth, to perform a final ritual. At the farm, Beatrice instructs them to restrain Judith in the birth room. As she begins the incantation, Judith breaks free, attacking them with unnatural strength. She overpowers David, slitting his throat before fleeing into the barn. Laura and Ellen chase after her, but she disappears into the shadows. Unaware that she was hiding, Judith cuts Beatrice's leg with a knife. Fueled by rage, she began stabbing wildly. Ellen and Laura, terrified, ran for their lives as Judith searched for them. Desperate, Laura urged Ellen to run as fast as she could and not look back. Determined to buy time, Laura stepped forward to confront Judith, and the two engaged in a fierce struggle. Meanwhile, in her hiding place, Ellen felt a sudden tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Beatrice standing over her. Instead of running, Ellen pleaded with Beatrice, begging her to help bring Jonah back. Beatrice performs a prayer, allowing Ellen to re-enter the Red Room. Inside, Ellen finds Jonah lying next to his mother's body. She pleads with him to return, and as he turns into dust, his spirit enters her. Meanwhile, Judith attacks Laura, ready to kill her, but Ellen intervenes. Jonah's spirit now inside her. The possessed siblings, Jonah and William, confront each other. A vicious struggle breaks out, with Judith gaining the upper hand, choking Ellen. But Jonah appeals to William, reminding him of their past bond. The screen flashes to a memory of the twins smiling together. Overwhelmed, William finally lets go, convulsing as dark energy escapes Judith's body. Laura awakens to find both girls back to normal. Beatrice, watching the reunited family, smiles. Finally, the curse has ended. If you enjoyed this recap, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.